Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking about a Vatican Archbishop under fire for comments on assisted suicide. Does Synod voting now include the whole church? And will Pope Francis be visiting Argentina? More in just a second. Hi, Mike, and welcome back to the Debrief. It's our weekly show where we dive into news, questions, and controversies facing the Catholic Church today. I'm Dominic de Souza, founder of SmartCatholics.
And I'm Mike Lewis, the editor and co-founder of the website Where Peter Is.
Whether you're a devout Catholic, a curious seeker, or just interested in the news and happenings in the Church,
here's our commentary, analysis, and context on the topics that you've asked us to discuss.
So let's dive into our first one. A Vatican Archbishop under fire for comments on assisted suicide. Mike, you expressed some frustration towards the Pontifical Academy for Life. It was on Twitter this past week. What's going on with Archbishop Lorenzo Paglia?
Well, it's a long story, but my frustration, for lack of a better word, comes down to how they have handled communications in the past 5 or 6 years. Just to give a little bit of background, the Pontifical Academy of Life for Life is one of the is a pontifical academy, just like the Pontifical Academy for Sciences, the Pontifical Academy for Social Sciences. Those two have long been academic academies that have pulled together people from varied backgrounds and experiences, different religious faiths, and they meet a couple of times a year and undertake some initiatives to discuss topics that are important to the world and to the Church. Pope Francis decided in 2016 that he wanted to reorganize the Pontifical Academy for Life to make it more like the other Vatican academies. It was founded in 1994 by Pope John Paul II, and it sort of developed a character of being more of a pro-life advocacy organization that focused specifically on issues like abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cells. And while those topics still remain part of the purview of the academy, Pope Francis wanted it to become a more scientific, a more academic, a more scholarly organization that drew from a wider variety of views, and as well as additional topics like the plight of the poor is a life issue. The obviously things like the death penalty, healthcare, nutrition, those sorts of things are vital to the Pontifical Academy for Life. Under John Paul II, members of the Academy had to take a pledge of orthodoxy to the Catholic faith, and now the organization welcomes non-Catholics. Sometimes they're picked for areas of expertise, and obviously, if you're not Catholic, in a lot of cases, you aren't going to hold to the Catholic position on everything. Now, this, obviously, such people would not be forming policy. Their documents are not magisterial, even if they were. Somebody who is hired or who is appointed to this academy because they're a great economist, they are, that person would be basically streamlined into that area of expertise. They wouldn't be writing, a paper on behalf of the academy or presenting on behalf of the academy on the topic of euthanasia, for example. So this was one of two organizations that Pope Francis decided to overhaul in this way. The other being the John Paul II Institute on Marriage and the Family. And so in both cases, in the John Paul II Institute, for example, tenured positions were eliminated. The institute was essentially refounded with a new name, although it's still the John Paul II Institute. And the Pontifical Academy for Life was also reinstituted with a new mandate and a new name. And Archbishop Paglia was appointed as the chancellor of the JP2 Institute and the president of the Pontifical Academy for Life. As far as I know, I've never met him personally, but he's apparently very orthodox, very committed to these issues. But unfortunately, there seems to be a communication problem, and it's been ongoing, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, especially in light of this recent incident.
Yeah, so that brings us back. Thank you for the overview. That brings us
Yeah.
up to speed then. Why are people so critical about him today?
So basically, he doesn't seem to have a grasp, nor does he seem to have anybody on his staff who understands the concerns of conservative Catholics in the Anglophone world, US, Britain, Australia, Canada. He discusses these issues in a way that easily triggers, the people who are upset at the overhaul in the first place. And recently he gave a speech on the issue of assisted suicide in Italy. My understanding, although I, as an American, don't really know the Italian political system, but apparently their constitutional court recently passed, a decision that opened up assisted suicide in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, so they've mandated it, but the parliament in Italy is discussing ways to regulate it. And my understanding, although this is my inference from outside sources, this is not obvious from the explanation or from the speech given by the Pontifical Academy for Life, is that he gave a talk in which he mentioned some things that, like, this might be the best we can hope for. This might be the most in line with the common good, according to Catholic teaching. Basically, this is inevitable, so let's do what we can to
practical damage control.
Exactly. But the headlines have been Pontifical Academy for Life president says assisted suicide is feasible. Another one is the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life favors legalizing assisted suicide. Vatican Archbishop open to decriminalization of assisted suicide. In other words, it's like, here's Archbishop Paglia, the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life in the Vatican, and he is being represented in the media by these, these statements. This is the narrative. So how did they reply? First of all, they issued a 1 or 2 paragraph response, only in Italian initially, in which it said, of course, Archbishop Paglia supports the magisterium on the issues of euthanasia and assisted suicide, and then follows it with a bunch of gobbledygook that no one outside of Italy understands. And it's funny because I tweeted and I said, there needs to be I can run this through Google Translate or DeepL, but there's no explanation for this, that an American can understand. And so this has been ongoing. It's like he puts his foot in his mouth. There are statements in the initial only available in Italian speech where he says something to the effect of the Catholic Church doesn't issue truth pills. And he talks about the development of doctrine on the death penalty and somehow ties that to assisted suicide. And so that seems to be implying that there might be a development in doctrine allowing, please just hire an Englishman or something, or an American, put him on your communication staff and have him offer the full explanation. Like, I am more than happy to look charitably upon what he says and give a charitable interpretation and an accurate interpretation. But when they give me nothing to go on, like, what can I do?
To understand, we're not talking about ill will necessarily or dissent. It's just miscommunication or poor articulation. And I think you even tweeted some clarification on this came from a surprising source. Church Militant?
Yes.
What did they have to say?
So their Rome correspondent, Julian Gomes, and he mentions in this video, he providentially had a meeting with them last Friday, and he spoke with them about these issues. He got to understand where they stood. He, I believe, is English, so he understands the European mindset a little bit better than maybe an American can, but he works for Church Militant. So obviously he has a basic understanding of the U.S. pro-life Catholic movement. And he gave the best possible explanation. But it's like, if the Pontifical Academy for Life is waiting for Church Militant to defend them, we're in a very bad state. Some reform is definitely needed when it comes to their messaging. And so I could go on forever, but
in terms of miscommunication, we had another situation that happened recently. Can you speak to the Anglican Mass that happened in Rome recently?
Yeah, and this was our teaser from last week, but I think it's been adequately explained by a number of sources. Basically, what happened was an Anglican group asked for permission to say Mass in the Lateran Cathedral, which is the Pope's cathedral. It's the seat of Peter's chair is in the Lateran. It's the most important of Rome's basilicas, not St. Peter's. It apparently, now some reports said that they said Mass on the main altar. They did not. It was it was in the apse, so the altar behind the main altar. If you're familiar with St. Peter's in Rome, it's the altar, like it would be like the altar of the chair, and it was apparently blocked off to visitors. But it was an Anglican bishop and 50 Anglican priests saying Mass, which we don't view as valid. It turns out it was a total miscommunication. Obviously, the headlines are Pope allows Anglicans to say invalid Mass in sacred cathedral on main altar, but I mean, it's one of these things where it's like, people make mistakes, and unfortunately, this pontificate is under a microscope. I think that this was explained adequately and thoroughly, and there was an apology. And Michael Lofton had a good video, I think, breaking it down. So maybe that can be, maybe we can link to that.
Yeah, people can check out Reason and Theology. He's been doing a bunch of really good work recently on this. Well, let's keep moving. So we want to talk about the next one. Does synod voting now include the whole church?
Yes. So this was the big news yesterday. Basically, the Pope made some changes to the synod process. The most significant of which was, so voting members of the synod, they're, typically 200 or 300 bishops that are invited, the heads of all the bishops' conferences, and then delegations based on Catholic population from each country. And then they had 10 non-bishops who were voting. They were all men. They were the superiors of men's religious orders that were voted to go and be voting members. They would usually be priests. I can't remember off the top of my head, but some of these orders have brothers as superiors, not necessarily ordained priests. And I think maybe they were granted the right to vote in a previous synod assembly, but don't quote me on that. But it's irrelevant now because they've changed that to 10 superiors, but 5 from women's orders and 5 from men's orders. So that's the first change. And so basically that 10 that would have voted, those 5 women plus Sister Natalie Betancourt, who is the undersecretary for the synod, those are the first 6 women now that can vote in a synod. But he went even further. He added 70 lay participants now have votes in the synod. And he, basically the instruction is they would be appointed by the Holy Father, and an effort would be made that it adequately represents men and women, so it would be divided evenly and according to, trying to, as well as possible, be a representative body of the laity of the church. So that means that, approximately 41 women out of the, I don't know, 300 or 400 voting members would, they would be women. And then the final thing is there would be participation from the entire church. I need to look a little bit more into the details, but it's like our turn isn't over. We'd be, we will, all of us, whether we're happy with what's going on or not, we will have a voice in the voting.
Okay. I want to ask in a second about if these votes are binding on the church, but first, well, let's ask that. So are they binding on the church? How should we take them?
So some people are complaining, some people are describing this as a democratization of the church. Some people are describing this as the synod becoming a parliamentary body. That is not the case at all, nor was it ever when the voters were just bishops and male superiors. The basically this the synod is an advisory body.
Hmm.
The synod, yes, they put together a document, they vote on that. They vote on every paragraph. They have a drafting committee that puts something together. It is fully within the Pope's authority to ignore everything that they say and to do nothing. It's basically with and under Peter. And
Hmm.
he, this as an advisory body, they will offer proposals, and he can choose to elevate their document to a magisterial document if he wants. He can
Hmm.
write his own document that draws from that, or he can decide he doesn't want to, write a document at all. Now, I wouldn't expect that last part, and I would expect he
Hmm.
would take that feedback very seriously. But the panic over it, or from the right, and the idea that this is a deliberative body that's going to change church teaching in the way that progressives might want. This
Hmm.
isn't the case at all. It's just these are the people that he's chosen that he wants to advise him in the synod, and that's what it comes down to.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to our last point. We have the Holy Father possibly a return visit to Argentina. He said that he looks forward to traveling back to his home country in October of 2024. What's special about this announcement?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, when Pope Francis came to Rome, the story goes he had no expectation whatsoever
He
that
bought a
he was
return
going.
ticket or something, didn't he?
Exactly. And he thought it was going to be a short trip. He didn't pack very much. Apparently, there are some nuns that keep his, cardinal clothes in Rome for
On
him.
ice.
So
Yeah.
so it was he packed light. He checked into a hotel, he went into the conclave, he was ready to head home, and then he gets elected pope. More than 10 years have passed. He has not set foot in his home country since then. This has been, for some people, this has been the source of conspiracy theories. People say, it's as extreme as, he's got a warrant out for his arrest because of crimes or
Oh,
something,
gosh.
from some of the more extreme traditionalists. Others say it's
Okay.
because he's totally unpopular there, and nobody likes him. Um, it's interesting because, well, first of all, before John Paul II, popes were Italian. Most of them didn't set foot outside of the Vatican
Mm-hmm.
until the 20th century,
Mm-hmm.
and then John Paul made a return visit to Poland the year after he was elected pope. I
Mm-hmm.
believe Pope Benedict's first trip was to Cologne in Germany because World
Mm-hmm.
Youth Day was held, right
Okay.
after his election. Um, Pope Francis has been to Latin America a number of times. And Argentina has not been a part of the trip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he says that he wants to go in October 2024 because it would be a year after the elections
Okay.
in Argentina. And apparently that has been one of the main reasons why he has avoided going. I think he had a
I
strong chance
see.
of going once,
Mm-hmm.
but it happened to fall right in the middle of a very tense political time. And
Yeah.
the Pope makes an effort to be nonpartisan, to not
Mm-hmm.
influence elections, to not be used as a political prop. And
Mm.
so he's
Okay.
stayed away, and in the past he's hinted that, and people have speculated that he won't go back. But
Okay.
this is the
Well, if he
first.
retires, do you think that he would return to live in Argentina? I think there have been rumors to that.
That was the original speculation early on in his papacy, but within the last year, I believe he said he's the Bishop of Rome. And that being the case, if he was to retire, now I'm of the opinion at this point that I don't think he will retire. But if he was to retire, he would retire to the uh, priest retirement home in Rome, for
Okay.
Roman priests. I think one of the things that he's done recently is he's emphasized, even though, he's born and bred, heart and soul, Buenos Aires, but
Hmm.
when he was elected Bishop of Rome, his role as local bishop has been very important to him.
Okay.
We often forget that the Pope is the diocesan bishop on top of being, the vicar of Christ.
Shepherd of the church. Yeah.
So, but he has tried to embody and even change some policies to re-emphasize his role as local bishop.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you again for covering these topics. Next week, friends, the Holy Father is traveling to Hungary. Well, it's going to be this weekend, so tune in next week. There's probably going to be something to respond to. It's a tense situation in that, especially that part of the world, since we're in the United States. So we'll probably have comments on that next week. Mike, thanks again for the debrief. Links to these topics are in the description. You can also check out wherepeteris.com to read the notes that Mike pulls together each week. For these, the conversation here is brought to you from SmartCatholics.com, the free online community for millennials, creators, and learners. Join our private Where Peter Is group to ask questions, share insights, and suggest topics for next time.
And visit wherepeteris.com to read articles, commentaries, and spiritual reflections by and for faithful Catholics who support the mission and vision of Pope Francis.
Share this episode with family, friends, and followers, and please hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of the Debrief.
And if you're interested in supporting us even more, consider becoming a Patreon sponsor for Where Peter Is. Your generosity helps us to continue to bring valuable content to you and to enhance the quality of this show. As you notice, I have my fancy Tula mic now. So thanks to our sponsors for making that possible.
That's right. Thank you, friends, for supporting Where Peter Is and supporting this show. You're creating the freedom for Mike and the team to keep doing things that are supporting the needs of the church. Thanks again for joining us. When it comes to news and controversies in the Catholic Church, stay curious, stay informed, and engaged. God bless you.